Nowe Miesto, 1938. Hana had blonde hair, blue eyes, and a very pretty round face. She was a strong girl. Once in a while, Hana would provoke a battle with George just to show off her muscles. Even though her brother was 3 years older, Hana would sometimes emerge the winner. But most of the time, Hana and George played well together. In the summer, in the creek behind their house, they pretended to be in the Navy. Climbing into an old wooden washtub, the children sailed along until one or the other pulled the plug in the middle and they sank, laughing and splashing. There were 3 different kinds of swings in the backyard meadow, one for a small child, a 2-seater, and one that swung from a giant tree out over the creek. Sometimes the neighborhood children would gather there for swinging contests. Who could swing the highest? Who could jump the farthest? Often, it was Hana. In the long halls of their apartment over the store, Hana raced on her red scooter, George on his blue one. In the winter, Hana and George built snow forts and skied. But Hana's greatest love was skating, and she worked hard perfecting her pirouettes on Nowe Miesto's frozen pond. Sometimes, when she wore her special red skating outfit, the one with the white fur on the ends of the sleeves, she imagined herself a dancing princess. Her parents, her friends, and her brother applauded both the performance and the dream. Because her parents worked 6 days a week, Sunday mornings were special for the family. When they woke up, George and Hana would snuggle up in their parents' bed under the fluffy feather comforter. On Sunday afternoons in the summer, they would all pile into the car and head off to the nearest fort or castle for a picnic, sometimes with Uncle Ludwig and Aunt Hedda, who also lived in Nowe Miesto. In the winter, there were sleigh rides and long cross-country skiing adventures. Hana was a very strong skier. On the 8-kilometer run between Nowe Miesto and a nearby village, which had a wonderful tea room with delicious, creamy pastries, Hana always led the big family pack of cousins, even though she was the youngest. But by New Year's Eve 1938, there was a new and menacing feeling in the air. There was talk of war. Adolf Hitler and his Nazis were in power in Germany. Earlier that year, Hitler had taken over Austria. Then, he had marched his armies into parts of Czechoslovakia. Refugees, people trying to escape the Nazis, started appearing at the Brady's door, asking for money, food, and shelter. They always found a warm welcome from mother and father. But the children were mystified. Who are these people? Hana wondered. Why are they coming here? Why don't they want to stay in their own homes? In the evenings, after Hana and George had been sent to bed, mother and father would sit by the radio and listen to the news. Often, friends came and joined them, and they would talk long into the night about the news they had heard. "We'll keep our voices down," they would say, "so as not to wake the children." The conversation of the adults was so intense, the discussion so heated, that they rarely heard the squeak of floorboards in the darkened hall as Hana and George tiptoed to their secret listening post just outside the living room. The children heard the talk about the new anti-Jewish laws in Austria. They heard about Kristallnacht in Germany, when gangs of Nazi thugs roamed through Jewish neighborhoods, breaking windows in homes and stores, burning synagogues, and beating people in the streets. "It couldn't happen here, could it?" Hana whispered to her brother. "Shh," said George. "If we talk now, they'll hear us and we'll be sent back to bed." One night, their neighbor, Mr. Rott, presented a shocking idea to the adults. "We can all feel that a war is coming," he began. "It's not safe for Jews to be here. We should all leave Nowe Miesto, leave Czechoslovakia for America, for Palestine, for Canada, for anywhere. Leave now before it's too late." The rest of the group was taken aback. "Are you crazy, Mr. Roth?" someone asked. "This is our home. This is where we belong." And that settled that. Despite the bad times, the Bradys were determined to celebrate the coming of 1939. On New Year's Eve, after a feast of turkey, sausage, salami, and pudding, the children got ready to play the traditional game of predicting the future. Hana, George, and their young cousins from nearby towns were given half a walnut shell, into which they each wedged a small candle. A large basin of water was dragged into the middle of the room. Each child launched a little walnut boat into it. 11-year-old George's boat wobbled in the water, turned round, and finally came to a stop, lopsided. His candle kept burning. 8-year-old Hana launched hers, and for a moment it glided along without a quiver. Then it shook, turned on its side, and the candle hit the water and went out. Tokyo, March 2000. From the day the suitcase arrived in Tokyo, Fumiko and the children were drawn to it. 10-year-old Akira, who usually loved to joke and tease, wondered aloud what it would be like to be an orphan. Maiko, who was older, loved parties and was an accomplished synchronized swimmer. She always became very quiet in the presence of the suitcase. It made her think about being sent away from her own friends. The suitcase was the only object they had at the center that was linked to a name. From the date on the suitcase, Fumiko and the children figured out that Hana would have been 13 years old when she was sent to Auschwitz. "A year younger than me," said one girl. "Just as old as my big sister," said Akira. Fumiko wrote back to the Auschwitz Museum. Could they help her find out anything about the girl who owned the suitcase? No, they replied. They knew no more than she did. Fumiko reported back to the children. "Try somewhere else," Maiko urged. "Don't give up," said Akira. The kids chanted encouragement like a chorus. "Keep on looking." Fumiko promised to do just that. Fumiko wrote to Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust Museum. "No, we have never heard of a girl named Hana Brady," the director wrote. "Have you tried the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C.? Fumiko rushed a letter off to Washington, but the reply was the same. "We have no information about a girl named Hana Brady." How discouraging it was. Then, out of the blue, Fumiko received a note from the museum at Auschwitz. They had discovered something. They had found Hana's name on a list. It showed that Hana had come to Auschwitz from a place called Theresienstadt.